Hello everyone. All right, so in the last couple of videos, we talked about nested if statement. And in the last video, we talked about multiple nested if statement. All right, so we kind of talked about the fact that if you have multiple conditions to write, to create in your programs, you can use the nested if statement, multiple nested if statements in your program, but it can be very difficult to keep track of, or it can be very difficult to read. So we said that if you wanted to do something like that, it's better to use the if-else-if statement. So in this video, we're going to create an example program implementing or using the if-else-if construct. But then in some cases, you can have multiple if statements embedded in your if-else in your entire if-else structure. All right, so this program using an if-else-if is about it's a simple, well, not a simple program. It's a common program that is going to ask the user to enter a test score, and then the program is going to determine the kind of letter grade that the user has based on the test score. So if the user got, let's say, a 90, then it's an A. If the user got, let's say, a 50, then it's an F, something like that. All right, so we're going to be asking for user input. So let's use the GOption pane for this one. We're just picking and choosing the GOption pane. We can use this kind of class. But let's use the GOption pane for this one. To use the GOption pane, we need to import java.util. Oops, sorry, I thought we were using this kind of the GOption pane. javax.swing.jOption pane. All right, with the GOption pane, we don't have to create an object. We can just go ahead and use the methods in the GOption pane class. So let's go ahead and ask the user to enter a test score, right? So GOption pane .show inputs dialog, and we need to display, or we need to type what's going to be displayed to the user. So we say enter a test score. Please enter a test score. I like to always put please. Okay, so the GOption pane's show input dialog method is going to pop up some kind of a dialog box with a text box embedded inside of it, and it's going to display this message to the user, and it's going to allow the user to type in something. So anything that the user types is going to be returned as a string. It's going to be sent back to us or returned to us as a string, even if the user types in a number. Right? By default, the show input dialog method always returns a string, even if the user types in a number. So let's create a variable that's going to store that string initially. So I'm going to come up here and create a string class type variable, and I'm going to call it user score. All right, so this user score variable is a string variable, but then it's going to hold the memory address of the string object that the user is going to type here. So we're going to end up storing the string here. This variable is going to point to that string object. All right, so user score is going to store the string that the user is going to type. By default, again, the show input dialog method always returns a string, returns whatever the user has typed as a string. So now we have the user score here, but the thing is, right now over here it's stored as a string. We need it as a number so that we can perform some comparison. We can perform, if we wanted to apply math to it, we can do it. But then as it stands now, we can't perform any math on a string, or we can't use it the way we want to use it in this program. So we need to go ahead and convert what's stored in user score, from a string to a number. In this case, we want that number to be of data type double, because it's a test score. The user can get 75.50 or 78.3. The user can get that score. So let's create that, or let's convert it to a double. All right, so in order to do that, we can use one of Java's wrapper classes to convert it to a double, as we talked about before. So I'm going to use double.pass. We'll talk more about the Java's wrapper classes in the future, but we briefly talked about it in the past. So double.pass double, and what do we want to pass? What do we want to pass to a double? What we want to pass to a double is the content stored in user score, which is really a string. We want to convert that to a double. So this is what we want to pass to a double. And so when this pass double method, when this whole statement, this method converts what's stored in here from a string to a double, it's going to send it back to us. It's going to return it back to us and say, okay, here you go. I've converted what you gave me from a string to a double. And so if it's given it back to us, then we need a place to store it. So I'm going to come up here and declare a double variable because it's given us a double. It's returning a double. And then I'm going to call it now. Okay, so I'm tempted to call this also user score, but because we already called it user score, it can be confusing. Normally what I do is, because the GOptionPane's ShowInputDialog method always returns a string, I tend to name this variable user input string. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's call this user input string, because by default this always returns a string. So if it's returning a string, well, first of all, we've declared a string variable, but let's call it user input string, right? Because that's the user's input, which is being returned as a string. And so we are storing the initial value that the user is typing, okay, which is a string. We are storing it here. And then now let's convert whatever is stored in user input string, okay? Let's pass that to a double. So we are passing what's stored in user input string to a double. And when it's done, it's going to return it to us. So now let's create the double variable that's going to store that double. And then now let's go ahead and call that user score, because it kind of makes sense that way. I don't want to call both variables, to even similar. Otherwise, we might get confused. So this stores the string. Once we convert that string to a double, we store it in user score. And it kind of makes sense naming it that way. So user score now is going to store the double value that this method here is returning. All right, now we have the user's value in a variable. So let's go ahead and test to see. We need to test to see. I believe that, let's see. So let's create a let's use a comment here to kind of write some notes. Let's use a multi-line comment. Oops. And I believe that, okay, so let's see, 90, I'm not sure about a gradient system, but let's use 90 and above. 90 and above, let's say you have an A. Oops, sorry, I'm typing. 90 and above, you have an A. And let's see, 89 to 90, 89 to 90, sorry, 89 to 80, sorry, right? I believe makes sense. We can change this however we want, but just for this video, let's just keep it this way. 89 to 90, you have a B, and 7 to 9 to 70, you have a C, and then 69 to 60. Yeah, 69 to, it's fine. 69 to 60. You have a D, okay, and then we can keep going and say E. Well, I haven't seen an E or anything. So A, B, C, D, and then anything below 60 is F, right? So below 60 is an F, right? Let's see if this is consistent with what it's in my college. I think so. 90 and above, right? So anything 90 and above. If it's not 90 and above, then it's below. Then it's it's below 90, right? So 89 to 80 is B. All right. So we'll work with this, right? But you can create any range that you want. All right. So first of all, let's check. Okay, now we have the test score. Let's check to see if the test score is below 60. Let's start with that. Okay. Let's eliminate anything that's less than 60. If it's below 60, then you have an F. So let's test that with our if-else statement. Sorry, with our if-else-if structure. So let's go ahead and start with an if. So what we want to check is if the user score is below 60, is less than 60, because according to this, that gives you an F, right? So if the user score is less than 60, then system.out.print. My typing is really off. Then println, you got an F. All right. So if now, if the user score is less than 60, the user gets an F. Now, what if the user score is not less than 60? Then that means that it's either 60 and above, right? It's 60 or above. If it's not less than 60, then the score is either 60 or above, right? But the thing is, we don't want to check for all the numbers that are 60 or above. For all the numbers 60 and above, we want to check the ones that are less than 70, right? Because for all the numbers 60 and above that are less than 70, then that means we are dealing with 69, okay, to 60, right? And that's this range over here. So let me kind of type it first and explain. So let's use an else. If, right, if you have multiple conditions, remember we talked about the fact that we can use an else if. Previously, what we were doing in the previous program was we'll create an else statement this way, and then we'll have another if statement in there. That can be very confusing. There's an else if statement you can use, right? So else if, and then we create another condition and have our block. Well, what happens if that condition is also true? Okay. So else if user score, right, again, so if the user score is not less than 60, this is when it's less than 60. If it's less than 60, you get an F. But if it's not less than 60, then we kind of know that then that score is either 60 or above. But we don't want to do something when it's 60 and above. For all the numbers 60 and above, 60 or above, we want to check for the ones that are less than 70. Right, so else if the user score is less than 70, okay, which means that we are dealing with numbers in the range of 69 to 60. If it's not less than 60 over here, then it's 60 and above. And for all the numbers 60 and above, we want the ones less than 70. So we are dealing with a range of 60 to 69, really. And so in that case, then you have a D, right? We are kind of eliminating numbers here. Right. So if your program gets to this point, then that means we know that your number is not less than 60. That means your number is 60 and above. And for now, all the numbers 60 and above, over here we're checking for the ones that are 60 and above, but at the same time less than 70. Okay. Anything 60 and above but less than 70 is the range 60 to 69. In that case, you get a D. Sorry, you got a D. Right. D. All right, so let's create another else if, because it's possible that your number is not less than 60 at the same time, not less than 70. So let's go ahead and create another else if condition. So if your score is not less than 60, then that means it's 60 and above. For all the numbers 60 and above, if it's also not less than 70, then that means that it's 70 and above. And we don't want to check for all the numbers 70 and above. We want to check for the numbers 70 and above, but at the same time less than 80, because if we do that, then we are dealing with numbers from 70 to 79. Okay, for all the numbers 70 and above, we are dealing with the numbers. For the number 70 and above, we don't want all of them. We don't want to check every number that's in every number 70 and above. We want to check the ones that are above 70, but at the same time less than 80, which gives us a range of 70 to 79. All right. So else, if the user score is less than 80, we are kind of eliminating numbers over here. If your program manages to get to this point, then that means that the score is not less than 60. At the same time, it's not less than 70. It's 70 and above. But for all the numbers 70 and above, we want to check for the ones that are 70 and above, but at the same time less than 80. So we are dealing with numbers 70 to 79. And from 70 to 79 over here, or 79 to 70, 70 to 79, same thing. We are dealing with a grade of C. So let me just copy this. In that case, you got C. Okay, so the same idea for the other ones. So let's go ahead and create the other ones too. All right, so if your score is not less than 80, then that means that your score is 80 or above. Okay, so we don't want to create a condition for all numbers 80 and above. If your program manages to get to this point, that means that your score is not less than 60, not less than 70, not less than 80. It's 80 and above. And if for all the numbers 80 and above, we want to check for the ones that are less than 90, because 80 and above but less than 90 is 80. Sorry, I keep on saying 80 and above. 80 or above but less than 90 is the range 80 to 89, right? And that's this range, 80 to 89. In that case, you go to B. So else if your user score is less than 90, then In that case, you got a B, right? 80 to 89, you got a B. All right. So if your score is not less than 90, if your program skips all of these, manages to get to this point, and your score is not less than 90, then you kind of have to create another else if, right? But if your score is not less than 90, then that means your score is either 90 or above. And we know that 90 or above is A. So we can go ahead and explicitly state that. Else, if the user score is in this case, we can go ahead and say if it's greater than or equal to 90, you can go ahead and do that. But then, if we're dealing with scores from 0 to 100, right? And your score is not less than 60, your score is not less than 70, your score is not less than 80, it's not less than 90, then that means it's 90 or above. So we can actually even use an else statement, just an else statement, and then say that, okay, you got an A, right? Because if your score manages to pass all this, that means your score is either 90 or above, right? There's nothing else that can be the case. If it skips all these, manages to pass all these, then that means your score is 90 or above. But the user can type in, let's say, a score of 105. 105 is not a valid score, so we have to kind of account for that too. So at the same time, the user can type in a negative number. We didn't account for it over here, but then we are going to account for anything above 100, and then you can use that same idea to account for things that are less than 0, right? I hope you get it. So let's kind of test for a range of 90 to 100 exactly, right? Let's not just create an else statement. Now, this else statement is optional. It's not required. You can just leave it out. You can create an if without an else, or without an ending else, and it will still work. You can end your program this way if you end your program this way if that's all you needed to do. All right. So instead of just saying else and leaving this else, to account for anything 90 or above, we don't want to do that. We don't want to account for anything 90 or above, because the user can type in 105, and 105 is not a valid score. So let's create a condition for numbers or test scores in the range of 90 to 100. So else if, right? So let's do that here. Else if the user score is, right? So if over here, if it's not less than 90, then we know it's 90 or above, right? But then over here, so we don't want all the numbers 90 and above. We want all the numbers 90 and above, but then at the same time, less than or equal to 100. Okay. We know that if your program manages to get to this point, then your score is either 90 or above. And for all the numbers 90 or above, right? We want on this condition, we want to check for only the ones that are 90 or above, but at the same time, less than or equal to 100, because 90 or above, but less than or equal to 100 gives you a range of 90 to 100, right? So actually, let's change this to 100, not above. 90 and 100, 90 to 100. That gives you an A, right? So in that case, let's give the person an A. And so, like I said, the else here is not required. Only when you need it. In this case, we need it. So if the person doesn't enter a score in the range of 0 to let's say in the range of 0 to 100, we can have an else statement here that says that anything apart from numbers in these ranges, let's display to the user that score is an invalid score. So or we can tell them, please enter a score in a range of 1 to 100. We can even use their value. You can say that user score, let's concatenate it with a string and say, is not a valid score. Please enter a score in the range of 1 to 100. All right, so I hope you get this logic, right? Because we're kind of eliminating certain conditions, right? So you enter a score. We check to see if it's less than 60. If it's less than 60, you got an F, and this if structure ends. If it's not less than 60, then that means it's 60 or above. And for all the numbers 60 or above, we want to create a condition for the ones less than 70. If your score is 60 or above but less than 70, we are creating a range of 60 to 69. You got a D in that case. If your score is not less than 60, it's not less than 70, then that means it's 70 or above. And for all the numbers 70 or above, we want to create a condition for the ones 70 or above, but at the same time less than 80, which gives us a range of 70 to 79. And in that case, you got a C. If your score is not less than 60, not less than 70, not less than 80, then that means your score is 80 or above. And for all the numbers, or for all the scores 80 or above, we don't want to check for all those. We want to check for the ones 80 or above, but at the same time less than 90. 80 or above, but at the same time less than 90 gives you a range of 80 to 89. In that case, you got to B. All right, so if your score is not less than 60, not less than 70, not less than 80, not less than 90, then that means that your score is 90 or above. Now, we could have written an else statement to account for anything 90 or above and say that, okay, you got an A. But then if the user got, let's say, 105, that's not a valid score. And so we are, we are defining a range ourselves and saying that, okay, if your score is not less than 90, and we know that your score is 90 or above, but then for all the numbers 90 or above, we want to create a condition, specifically for anything 90 or above, but at the same time less than or equal to 100. That gives us a range of 90 to 100, right? And in that case, you got an A. I forgot to change this. You got an A. I'm sure most of you are waiting for me to change this. Yeah. In that case, you got an A. If you got 90. Anywhere from 90 to 100, then you got an A. If the user types in anything other than 0 to 100, if let's say we know that over here, if your program manages to get to this point, then your score is 90 or above. We've created the conditions for 90 or above, but at the same time less than 100 over here. But if your score is, let's say, 105 or 120, this trailing else, this last else will catch it. It will catch anything that is not in the range of these numbers. And if your score is not in the range of these numbers, then else, right? If none of these conditions are true, then switch to this else. Okay, do all these, but if it's not else, then you tell the user that, hey, your score is it's not a valid score. It's not in any of these ranges. Please enter a valid score. Right now we've accounted for, let's see. We've accounted for anything greater than 100, and this message is going to display. But we haven't accounted for negative numbers, for example, because negative numbers will still be less than 60, and then we'll tell the user you got an F. But you can use that same idea and say that, okay, over here you can say that if you can create another if condition and say if the score is, let's say, less than 0, right? Then you tell the user that it's not a valid score, and we'll get more into that with what's called logical operators. But for now, just learn from this particular else. Learn from this particular else if condition over here of how to kind of limit it from 90 to 100, right? Limited, from exactly 90 to 100. We'll talk more about how to block other ranges of numbers out and leave a certain range of numbers that you want. All right, I think I'm talking too much. So we're done with this. Let's test this out. So actually, we use the GOptionPane class, but then over here I use the system.out.println statement to print it out. I was supposed to use the GOptionPane to display it too. So let's quickly do that, right? Because this is going to display it using, our kind of like our console, but we wanted to use the GOptionPane, right? Because to make it a bit fancy. So let's change the way we are actually outputting our values using the GOptionPane. And to display that using the GOptionPane, right, we can use the GOptionPane's show message dialog, right? So let's quickly do that. It's the same way to output. It's just we are using the GOptionPane. So GOptionPane, and I'll copy and paste here. So GOptionPane.show message dialog. Right, and we know that it takes a couple of arguments. I'm going to type in null, so null is going to center the dialog box on the screen, and this is what's going to be displayed. All right, so same idea. I'm just going to copy this and paste it here. This time you got I think it's a D, right? Less than 70. Oops. Yeah, that's a D. And over here that's a C. And over here it's a B. So you got an F, you got a D, C, B, and over here you got an A. Yeah, I think I was speeding through it too much. So all right, so this is, before that I don't want to, I want to copy the string, so I'm just going to do this here, cut that, and then delete this line, paste the string here. Okay, user score. All right. Okay, so now we're using the G option pane to display the results or the output. Okay, so we know that with the G option pane, anytime we use it, we have to terminate that extra task that is created anytime we start the G option pane, that extra task, which is called a thread. So I'm going to call system.exit, and I'm going to pass in 0. System.exit is going to terminate that extra thread or task that is started by the G option pane, and I'm passing in 0. That 0 is going to be sent to the operating system. It's a way for the operating system to know that if the program run, it got to this point and 0 was received. Normally when the operating system receives a 0, it's normally an indication that the program run got to this point and basically executed successfully. Okay, all right, so let's compile this, and we don't have any errors, so that's good. Let's run this, and please enter a test score. I'm going to enter 60 and hit OK, and it says you got a D, right? Because we said anything from 60 to 69 is a D, and then the program exits. So the way that if else if works is, as long as one of these conditions is true, the if else if structure ends, just like the if else statement. If the condition is true, then what's in the true block runs, and if it's false, what's in the else block runs. Just like this, as long as one of these conditions is true, that what's in the block runs, and then the if else if structure ends completely. All right, so let's try again. Let's try something like 400, right? Because 400 over here, it's going to be triggered in this else block, because this else if here is testing for numbers that are, for all the, if your number is not less than 90 over here, that means your score is 90 or above, and this is checking for all the numbers 90 or above, but at the same time less than or equal to 100, which gives you a range of 90 to 100. But this else is dealing with anything that's out of all these ranges, out of 100, right? Because we've checked for all these ranges here, anything out of 100. And so when I hit OK, now it's saying 400 is not the valid score. Please enter a score in the range of 1 to 100, and then the if else if structure ends, because this else part was what was triggered. This runs, and then the if else if structure exits. Let's try one more. Let's type in 60. No, actually, let's type in 78 and hit OK. It says you got to C. 79 to 70, 78 falls in that, so you got to C. So this was triggered. This was triggered. All right, so I hope that you learned something from this, and it kind of help you make more sense of the if else if structure. Again, the else part here is optional. You don't have to. It's not required unless you absolutely need it. Unless you wanted to do something when none of your conditions you've specified over here is true. All right. So watch out also for indentation. It's the same indentation idea when you're working with if statement. You have your if, your curly braces in line with that. If you wanted to stick with this style of creating your if statements, that's also fine. You could also do something like this, right? But make sure they're in line. If you wanted to stick with something like that, that's fine. But I like to stick with this. So you have your if, else if, your condition, you close it, and then your curly brace is in line with your your clauses. So if has its ending curly brace here, else if has its ending curly brace here. This else if opening curly brace here and then curly brace here. Make sure it's indented properly. It makes it very easy to read. So this is kind of easier than creating multiple nested if statements. Using the if-else-if structure makes it easy, but in some cases you'd end up using multiple nested if statements. You end up embedding multiple if statements in your if-else structure. Okay. All right, so I hope this helped. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comment section, and I'll do everything to respond to them. Thank you very much for watching. As always, take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time in the next video. All right then, bye-bye.